Greetings everyone, welcome to Datagaps webinar. I'm Pooja Gupta, Growth Marketing Manager at Datagaps, and I would like to thank you all for joining us today. Today, in this clinical webinar, we will explore why dashboard errors like KPI mismatches and visual inconsistencies happen, and how BI teams can detect them before they reach business users. We will also demonstrate how Datagaps BI Validator with GenAI powered validation helps ensure dashboards remain accurate, reliable, and trusted for decision making. On this panel today, we have Subhanshu Dikshit, our Senior Solution Engineer at Datagaps. And with this, I hand this over to Subhanshu. Subhanshu, stage is all yours.
Thank you. I assume I can be heard well and my screen is visible.
Yeah, yes.
All right. So let's get right into it. The first thing that we're going to discuss is, again, what are the different aspects which I am trying to look into. So we'll be using this as a sample use case for our system, where we're going to start with what case study we're going to look into, which is in what exactly do we do? What does Datagaps really do? Then who are we? Then I'd like to showcase a few features of the product via a demo, and then we'll conclude the session. So let's get right into it. The very first thing that we want to start with is a case study, and I want to use this as a starting point to kind of set the stage on what we are trying to cover. So what you have is a case study. Again, we don't have to go through all of it, but the key aspect of this case study was that a client of ours had a lot of different KPIs that had to be validated across different filter combinations. Let's think about the entire problem statement. You have Tableau reports which are built out of, say, a particular database, and a lot of metrics are aggregated, transformed, and these reports are subject to hot fixes all the time. So now you have this problem statement where you have a large number of reports, and the reports themselves have a large number of filters that can be applied, and all of the filters affect each and every report consistently. And now you have a time crunch in which you have to ensure that all the numbers that you deal with across all the dashboards are valid for all filter combinations. This is a difficult problem statement to resolve, but our application is capable of doing this. So if you scan the QR code, you'll actually see a link to this particular case study and exactly how we resolve this. But today you will get a sneak peek on how exactly we function towards this. And that's where we're going to come in. So with that, let's introduce Datagaps. We've been in this business for about 13 years now, and we have 100 plus clients across various industries, big pharma names, big university names, a lot of partners, and of course, logistics, finances, and banking. Anywhere there's data, where there are BI reports, our application is used to ensure that you can trust the numbers you're actually dealing with, and to ensure that the data you're feeding to your existing systems, be it ML models, generative AI models, BI pipelines, or end-to-end systems, is in fact valid and properly processed. This is a wide statement indeed. Therefore, to ensure that we can compartmentalize this in different set of teams, we separate the product out into a BI validator dedicated to the use cases we will discuss today. And of course, for the data sides, we have data quality monitor and ETL validator, built to both check the data you're dealing with as well as the transformations that the data undergoes. With the supplement product provided test data manager, you can create synthetic data, which is going to really streamline the entire process for you, especially if you don't have a lot of production grade testing data for your lower environments. We have been recognized by Gartner as a specialist in this end-to-end field, and top 5 of the biggest Tableau users are using our application for the validation. As you will see, Tableau upgrades are a little infamous, and we have a good use case around that to ensure that you don't have to deal with any unintended changes or dashboard failing within your next Tableau upgrade. So let's take a look at the few set of features that we want to cover today. The first set of feature is going to be along the lines of source validation. The next ones are going to be in functional testing. After that, we're going to discuss regression, some report to data compare, a bit of performance, and of course, security. Now, from your perspective as an end user, it could be that you're not looking for the entire suite. You might be looking just for a couple of test cases. Well, don't worry, you can just pick and choose what you would like to run with. And you can even decide which BI tool you're focusing in on. Because at the end of the day, we work for Power BI, we work for Tableau, we work for OBIE, Cognos, and there are a few other tools that we support in limited capacities. One thing that's not actually present here is a new use case that is coming, for which we have entire webinars dedicated, which is a cross BI migration. So if you're ever dealing with a migration scenario from Tableau to Power BI or any tool to another, reach out to us because we have tools to enable automatic validation of that entire migration as well. One other aspect that we want to get into before we start the demonstration is a quick disclaimer about the product in terms of its deployment and architecture. We understand that most reports that people deal with are sensitive in nature, and nobody would want their reports ever leaving their secure space, especially from an architectural perspective. So our application can be installed and deployed in its entirety within the client's infrastructure itself. So it's your infra, it's behind your firewalls. Nothing is ever sent back to us. Even if you're using our opt-in optional generative AI features, nothing is ever sent back to us. Everything remains behind your firewalls. With that, let's jump right into the demo. So I have a few use cases ready for us. Let's get that started. So with each use case, I'm going to be providing a sort of story. So we'll kind of lay in that story as well. And let's open up the application for this. So the very first thing you'll be doing is you'll be going into the application, and depending on the access level, you might get access to multiple containers, multiple projects, or a singular. The very first thing you're going to do is you're going to define your Tableau connection. The reason I want to showcase this is that this is a connection directly with the BI server, and this is going to help us automatically create test cases as well as automatically execute test cases. You'll see our application is integrated with BI tools at a very good level, to the point that we can go in and apply filters in a dynamic fashion. And I'll discuss that shortly. So this is our Tableau connection. This is our Power BI connection. And from an end user's perspective, they work in an identical fashion. So if you're a company who has a lot of, say, different BI projects and you switch between Power BI and Tableau, the application can work in the exact same fashion. You don't need extra training to reuse the product in any other BI tool. Now, let's discuss a bit on the use cases that we want to cover. So this is a KPI validation use case that is spread across multiple clients. Here's the story that they had. They had BI reports where they had a lot of different metrics that they wanted to validate. Now, wanting to validate KPIs is a very good kind of initiative, but it's missing a key pointer. Validate how? With respect to this question, we have a couple of answers as from Datagaps. So the answer that you might not think of that is possible within our application is using observability. If you're a BI tool kind of user who is isolated only to the BI tool and they don't have access to the golden warehouse at all at any cost, well then, you can use the same reports that you see every day, and the application can apply machine learning on top of them to ensure that the numbers match the previously seen numbers in, say, previous versions. That is option A. Option B, however, is much more popular and has been done by a lot of our clients, where they ensure that the numbers seen in the BI reports match the numbers seen in the golden warehouse. Now, golden warehouse is a standard term. It can be an Excel file. It can be a combination of a file and a table, or a combination of multiple tables. You have a lot of options here. And once you create this test case, it's a one-time activity. Anytime you execute it, the latest report is picked up, the latest data is picked up, and we run a compare. Let's take a look at this in action. I have this test case ready to go. And so in the diagram, you see exactly what we are trying to do. I've replaced this with an Excel file just for the sake of illustration. So I have a Tableau report right here, and you'll see that I have defined my connection directly with the Tableau report, and the BI report is going to be rendered in real time. So if I'm working with this particular system and if I'm extracting numbers out, you'll see that I have access to these numbers inherently, all the KPIs, all the charts. The best part about this is that the numbers are subject to filters and slicers. Hold on to this point, as this will be the next test case that we will discuss. But the key aspect I want to focus in on is that the numbers and the state of the report is dependent on the filters being applied. Not just that, there's an entire subsection for filters. We will get back to this shortly. Our main problem statement, however, is to ensure that the data is extracted from our BI report, and that's as easy as just selecting the worksheets and you're done. There's no code involved after all. And what happens in the backend is that we open up a browser, we open up the report, we apply the filters, and then we extract the information, in this example as data sets. So that's what you see right here. The only thing left to do is to run a comparison against our source of truth. So in this example, I have an Excel file that contains this said source of truth across multiple sheets. All right, so I just pick it up as is. I can even parameterize the file name. That way, every time I pick up the updated file. And then we compare every visual against the corresponding data set that we have. During this comparison, data type conversion, column name mismatches, column order mismatches, all of these hassles are handled by the product inherently. And it tells you specifically where the problems lie. So now I'm aware that this particular profit analysis by segment or graph or visual is incorrect because the values seen in the data do not match the values seen in the actual graph. In fact, there are extra values present in the graph which are not really present in the data for some reason, and we raise alarms on that. In fact, that raising alarm part is not just a figure of expression. That is something that we can do inherently as part of our unit test case generation, meaning we can create tickets, we can send out notifications. There's a ton of options that you have as an end user right there. Now, let's add a layer of complexity to this. Here, the data is already aggregated. Chances are that's not the case in your system. Chances are you have to aggregate it yourself. So when you're doing this, do note that we have a traditional query builder to help you do this, as well as an opt-in AI assistant, which won't hallucinate and which will be context clear in terms of the query that you're putting in. So you have a lot of options in recreating the transformation logic, thus ensuring if anything is amiss, if anything does not match, be it by a point or by an entire system, you can define it. And by the way, here we have just a minute difference. This could be a rounding error. So don't worry, you can always go in and define thresholds within the application as well. So that's the first test case and a real kind of use case that a lot of our clinical clients get into. Another extension to this is the next aspect, which is basically applying these for a bunch of filter and slicer parameter combination. So what exactly do I mean by this? Let's look at this animation to, for better understanding of this. So here you see that we are trying to apply different filters and we're trying to check if the graphs actually match the data set. That is precisely what we want to do within our application as well. We want to apply different filter combinations and ensure that everything is working as intended. Now here it's against the database because this is the usage that the client has picked up. But there are other use cases, especially in upgrade testing, where people want to ensure that for all filter combinations, the report is still valid. The report looks correct and the numbers are correct. So that's what we get into next. In our next use case, you will see that I have already defined this P tab. Let's actually set the stage, so to speak. Within our application, we have something called as BI tabs. And within this, we have something called as filter data sets. So when I open up this particular filter data set, what you see here is the permutation and combination list that is automatically generated by the application so that we can reuse the previously seen test cases. In this example, 64 times. And each time we run it for a different filter combination. That way we are being absolutely thorough in ensuring that each and every test case is executed in that fashion. In fact, if I move to the next tab, you will see that we have an iteration task which is dedicated to this exact thing, where we apply all the expected filters, all the expected slicers. And then in the run history, you get a proper understanding of how many test cases failed, how many test cases passed. In fact, here's what you can see. Let's open up the iteration. So here you see for some of them, they have passed and for the others, they have failed. And you get to see for which particular filters there are differences found and for which particular filters differences are not found. That's exactly seen. So this is the level of thoroughness that the application provides you as end users. Moving on to the next use case. Now, regression and upgrade comes in as a very important pointer. And this is across multiple clients. So I've just clubbed everything together. Be it upgrading your reports from one system to another, or be it making sure that the corresponding system that you're dealing with is actually correct. So say after an Tableau upgrade or after an update within systems, or maybe you're migrating your endpoint from one system to another, regression is very important. So what we show in terms of regression is that if there are any types of differences between reports, be it positioning differences, be it filter definitions itself or applied filters differences, be it color differences, alignment differences, font differences, or the actual value itself being incorrect, we are going to capture all of these. So what this is going to look like is a little more like this, but of course, I would like to show you a live example. So let's go back to our system and bring in one of these use cases. Let's use Power BI as a system for use case here. All right. And here you will see what the application has actually captured. Firstly, since we're working with dev and production, I have intentionally removed this particular section from the comparison. That way there are no false positives. But everything else that is not matching from a textual perspective or from a missing data perspective or from a string perspective is being called out. Not just that, we also do a pixel to pixel comparison between both the reports. That way we tell you exactly where the problems are between your report A and report B. Again, this could be the same version of the report, different versions, different environments. There's a lot of kind of options present right here. So we call out these type of issues. And then, as discussed, filter definitions are being called out. If filter values are changed, say you're moving from Europe to EU, that change is being captured. And of course, performance is also something we take into account. Because we are akin to an end user trying to access the report, we also have to wait for the report to load in. And so there is a soft performance test. And if after a migration, if your reports are slower, well, the end user will simply call it out and tell you that the reports are indeed slower than expected, especially when compared. This is a very powerful test, mainly because you can just drag and drop and create these test cases in bulk. And that's the intended method. So going back to our next use case that we would like to cover here, it is stress testing. So do know that what I was discussing earlier is testing in terms of soft performance. So what do I mean by that? Well, again, if a visual is taking long to load, there are two aspects to it. Either if, say you're a singular user trying to, develop these reports, or you're just a group of 6, 7 people trying to make these reports, and you see a particular visual taking a lot of time. Well, that's one way to look at it, right? You might want to ensure that this is working in this particular fashion. But you are aware that on Monday morning on 10 a.m. or around 8 a.m., there's going to be at least 50 people trying to access reports at once. And at that time, regardless of what BI tool you're using, Power BI or Tableau, you will have to ensure that the allocated resources to the compute of that BI server or service is appropriate. So for Power BI, you have premium capacity. For Tableau, you have other equivalent measures of increasing the memory, increasing the processing units, and so on. But this has to be tested. And so this is another use case for which a lot of our clients use our product, which is stress testing. So this is the screen we'll be looking into, but I want to showcase this on a PPT. That way you have a better understanding of what each and every segment actually means and what we're trying to achieve with this. So depending on the project, again, the simulation is going to be different. Well, you need to ask questions on what you would like to simulate, and the answers are going to help you fill in the run options. For example, what is ramp up time? Ramp up time is basically how fast are the users going to flood in at once. So, if it's a financial report at 10 a.m. Monday morning, you can assume that everyone's highly interested in that. So as the floodgates open, it can be that you might be reaching from 0 to 100 in about 3 minutes. So you can define that right here. You can define how long a report is being used. You can define how many filter combinations you're putting in. And the best part about this is that you can also reuse the stress test as a proper auditing mechanism, because you can provide the list of the 50 users who are going to use this, who you want to simulate. And then when the application executes these test cases, we will be impersonating those specific users. And every time we impersonate those users, every time we try to open up a report, apply a filter, we are keeping track of the time as well as a snapshot of the actual report. I'd like to showcase this live. So let's go into configuration. Now let's go to, BI DevOps, stress test. So you'll see we have the same thing for Power BI, Tableau, OAC. All of this work in the exact same fashion. I will use Tableau for the sake of illustration. So again, the run options that we see are right here. We don't have to repeat them. What we'll get into is the run history. Now in run history, you'll see that since we ran this for multiple reports, we see the average open time at a report level and so on. But for a particular report page, you can even see the different filter combinations that we had applied across the systems, if they were successfully applied, and who was trying to access this report, applying which filter, what was the response code, what did the report look like, what was the duration. All of these numbers are critical for our system. And yes, you can export them and reuse them for further processing from your existing system. So that's basically what we are trying to achieve with our stress test. Now, let's finish up this particular system. Now we're going to be using this slide as we discuss some questions. But one thing I would like to get into is that what we have covered today is kind of the tip of the iceberg. These were the main use cases that most of our clients go for. However, there's a lot of niche use cases that come in as well. Measure definition validation across workbooks, data model validation across different workspaces, ensuring that standardization of font, color schemas, and other systems are present. These are just a few of the important use cases that we usually come into. So with that, I would like to open the floor up for questions.
Okay, so thanks, Shubhanshu. So moving forward with the Q&A session. First is regarding the migration from one visualization tool to another. Do you have experience with transitions? For example, from Tableau to QuickSight?
Yes. So these are the different set of tools that we would like to work with. QuickSight is something that we have recently added as well. So yes, at the moment you're migrating from one BI tool to another, the application has been used in validations. In fact, we have a case study where we have about 5,000 Tableau reports which have been migrated to Power BI, and our application has been used to validate these reports not just in terms of numbers, but also in terms of look and feel. And the cherry on top is that we have validated these reports for multiple filter combinations. So this has been absolutely thorough validation, completely automated, and again, 100% validation on that front.
Okay, thanks. Um, Next is how does I see the results of these test cases?
That is actually a great question. Let me actually showcase that since we have some time for that. So when you execute test cases, you have multiple types of reports that the application provides for you. So what you see on your screen is one of these reports. If I go into a summary, you see that, okay, there were 8 workbooks which I executed. Out of them, well, there's a lot of failures. One of them is still executing. And I can open up a particular report and see what are the different type of test cases associated with that report, and then dive deeper and understand exactly what went wrong in which particular report. Like in this example, I see the data compare report has failed. So there are a few issues in this particular report. And the best part about this is that I have a ton of customization present throughout. If I really want to, I can see this report in Power BI and Tableau as well, or customize this within my section. So there's a lot of different ways in which the application works and provides you exactly which set of reports have failed and for what specific reason.
Okay, next is can I know your GenAI add-on details to the use cases demoed today?
So generative AI is completely optional. Firstly, you don't really need it for using the product, but if you are going to use it, the way we are going to define our connection is going to integrations, and you'll see a very critical step here, which is the LLM endpoint is going to be your very own. So we're not going to provide an LLM endpoint. We're not going to connect to your system at all. That would be breaking compliance. So we would connect to your existing system. This can be Azure AI Foundry, Azure OpenAI. And once you define this integration, there are two main places where this comes in. The first one is in query generation. So in my use cases, when I am, say, creating a particular query, let's open up an existing test case here. If I'm adding some SQL logic to it, what I can do is I can ensure that the SQL query is being generated using an AI assistant or via the query builder. AI assistant is really helpful because you can just convert those plain text transformations into a query. That's the first place where this comes in. The second place where this comes in is that it comes in regression use cases. So when we do a comparison from a visual perspective, you can actually use a generative AI system to tell you and summarize these changes for you. But the place where this is applicable the best is in a cross BI use case. So here, this is a Tableau to Power BI migration. Obviously, because the rendering between systems is so inherently different, you can't compare them pixel to pixel. Instead, what you do is that you let an AI report come in. So here, this is a visual LLM that comes in and summarizes all the changes for you in this example. So that is how you kind of look into the reporting section. And that's how you use generative AI in these two main places. There's a few more use cases when it comes to ETL and DQ, but from a BI perspective, these are the two that are most helpful for our end users.
Great, thanks. Next is I have about 500 reports. Can I make test cases in bulk?
Absolutely. That's a great question. Yes, you can create test cases in bulk. Within the data flow section, we have our generate functionality. And using this, you can generate test cases in bulk. In fact, I have just done this in a demo a couple of hours back, where I've created about, say, these 6 or 7 use cases all together. You see an hour back, we just created 6 or 7 test cases. And again, all I did was I dragged and dropped dashboards. And in pipelines, as we saw earlier, you can see the summary of all of these reports being executed at once. So that's another key aspect that we can do. Scale is not really a problem for us, even in terms of execution, because we are Scala based. We can execute hundreds of test cases for all permutation and combination of filter application in parallel.
Great, thanks. Next is how does the application help with migration projects?
That's an excellent question. So today we are focusing on the BI side of things. So when we're looking at BI migration validation, what we want to ensure is that the numbers between the reports match as well as the data. So that is the first example. In fact, if I go back to my, say, cross BI use case, and cross BI is a special outlier here. Because many times if you're looking for migration, it could be that you're just changing the same kind of BI. You're using the same BI tool, you're just changing the endpoint. That could be one place. But regardless, the two key pointers that we would like to apply is that the numbers between the, regardless of if it's a cross BI or the same BI tool, that's the first check. And the second check is that the visuals should match. So if the numbers are incorrect, that's one issue. If the visuals are incorrect, that's another issue. And the final one is both in terms of filter definition and filter application. So before and after a migration, if your filter definitions have been altered, that's a problem we would like to highlight. And let's say after a migration, if you're applying filters and the numbers don't match, or if visuals are not loading in, that's another aspect which we would like to help with. And throughout this entire process, automatic test case generation is going to be the main use case. So you won't really have to deal or spend a lot of time creating these test cases. And execution is going to be a cakewalk because at the end, the pipelines handle all the execution process for you.
Okay, next is what are the BI tools that this supports?
The BI tools that we're currently supporting in this current version are the following. It's Tableau, it's Power BI, it's OBI, OSC, it's Oracle ERP, it's Cognos, it's QuickSight. And we also have limited support for SAP BO objects, and we're also adding support for other BI tools. Especially from a migration perspective, we like supporting older tools on that front, but we run on market demand. So most of the folks should be able to get these use cases inherently.
Okay, next is can we schedule these validations?
Yes, there's a scheduler that comes right within the application itself. That's something which you can use to execute these test cases. However, if you have an existing, say, CI/CD tool that you would like to work with, say you're using Jenkins, say you're using Azure DevOps, or perhaps you're using GitHub Actions, this can be any of the following. The application can inherently be connected with that so that your existing scheduling tool can be used to execute test cases as per your requirements, be it CI/CD centric or project timeline centric.
Great. Thanks. Thanks, Subhashu. These are all the Q&As that we had today. And I would like to thank you as well for beautifully presenting all the use cases and presenting how Datagaps BI Validator is resolving BI dashboard issues and others. Now, if anyone has any of the use cases that still need answers, you can always contact us at contact@datagaps.com. And we will be very happy to answer all your queries and use cases. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
For further questions, feel free to reach contact@datagaps.com. Scan the below QR code for free demo. Thank you.